No one will believe an old woman. That's what my grandson said as he walked past me, not even looking back. His voice was calm, almost bored, as if he were stating a fact everyone in the world already knew. And the worst part wasn't the words themselves. It was how easily he said them, as if my pain were a small thing, as if I were a small thing. I stood in the doorway, still holding the cup of tea I'd made for him. My hand trembled, and a bit of the tea spilled on the floor. But he didn't turn around to notice. He was already upstairs, laughing. That low, careless laugh that used to be sweet when he was little, but had grown sharp these last few years. I didn't understand what he meant. Not at first. I thought he was just being rude, as teenagers sometimes are. Then my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Messages. Notifications. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. The video was already uploaded, but I didn't know that yet. I walked to the kitchen table, sat down slowly, my knees aren't what they used to be, and opened the first notification. A girl I didn't know had tagged me. Another one had left a comment with laughing emojis. And then a link. When I clicked it, I saw my own face staring back at me. My face, confused, tired, caught at an angle no decent person would choose. The caption read, "Crazy Granny Meltdown." For a moment, the room around me became silent. I could hear only my heartbeat. Steady, too loud, too present. I watched the clip. It was from yesterday, when I'd been looking for my keys in the living room. I had been frustrated, muttering to myself, yes. But everyone talks to themselves sometimes. Everyone forgets their keys now and then. There was nothing shameful in it. But they made it shameful. The camera had been hidden behind the lamp. I hadn't even known he was recording me. He must have taken the video later, edited it, added that ridiculous music. The comments were already piling up. She's losing it. She needs a home. Old people are scary, LOL. I put the phone down very carefully, as if moving too quickly might crack something inside me. Upstairs, I heard footsteps, a door opening, a burst of laughter, his voice mixed with someone else's. Friends, maybe, or cousins. Kids who had once called me Gran with affection. Now they called me Content. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. I wasn't angry yet. No, anger comes later. First comes disbelief, that soft, trembling place where your heart tries to tell you that surely, surely, this cannot be happening. Surely the child you bathed and held and fed wouldn't humiliate you like this. Surely he didn't mean to hurt you. But I am 74. I have lived long enough to know when someone means something. I heard him coming downstairs again. I didn't move. He walked into the kitchen, pulling a hoodie over his head. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice soft. Too soft. Out. He didn't sit down, didn't look at me, didn't see the video still open on the table. "Cam," I tried again, "that video, did you—" He finally glanced at me then. Just a flick of his eyes. Not guilt, not fear, annoyance. "Oh, that. Relax. It's just a joke." A joke. My throat tightened. People are laughing at me. "That's the point," he said with a shrug, grabbing his phone. "Don't take it so seriously." "Why would you do that to me?" He rolled his eyes. That bored teenage gesture that cuts sharper than any knife. "Gran, no one's going to believe whatever story you make up about this. You're old. You mix things up all the time." The words hit me harder the second time. No one will believe an old woman. He brushed past me, the wind from the door stirring the hem of my sweater. A moment later, He was gone, leaving me alone in the quiet kitchen with a cooling cup of tea and a video I hadn't asked for. I sat there a long time, longer than I meant to. I let the silence settle around me like a blanket, heavy and familiar. And in that silence, something that had been dormant in me for years shifted. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of awakening, a small, steady voice inside me, the one I had ignored for decades, finally lifted its head. This isn't right, Evelyn. And you know it. I looked at the screen again, at the comments, at my own face, and I felt, for the first time in a very long while, the beginning of a resolve. Before everything turned sour, before the laughter behind closed doors and the videos I never agreed to be in, my life used to feel quieter, not easier. Age never makes things easy, but steadier, like a path I knew well enough to walk even in the dark. I suppose that's what routine gives you. Safety. Even when the people you love start drifting away one small inch at a time. I wasn't always the old woman who mutters over her keys. I was once the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who kept a house running, who held the family together when my husband died. I was the one who helped my daughter through her divorce, the one who cared for my son after his layoffs, the one who watched little Cameron every weekend when his parents needed space. Space from what? I never asked. Some questions aren't worth the answers. Cameron was a sweet boy then. He'd curl up beside me on the couch, ask for stories, tell me secrets his parents didn't have the patience to hear. He'd hold my hand when we crossed the street. I can still feel the warmth of that small hand, the trust in it. It's strange how memories stay warm even when the people in them turn cold. But time, as it always does, thinned out the closeness. Not in one moment, nothing dramatic. Just subtle changes, like a shirt fading in the wash. First, he stopped coming over without being asked. Then he stopped calling me Gran, using my name instead. Evelyn, too formal for a child. Then he began rolling his eyes at my stories, as though the years I'd lived were some kind of joke. And I let it happen. That's the truth of it. I let every small disrespect pass by, thinking it was just adolescence, thinking it would soften again with age. But disrespect doesn't soften. It spreads. His parents didn't help. My daughter-in-law, Nora, a woman who always looked at me as though I were a slightly disappointing antique, kept encouraging Cameron to think for himself, which really meant, don't listen to your grandmother. My son, Michael, too tired from work to involve himself, simply nodded along. Mom, don't take everything so personally, he'd say, as if the way they spoke to me wasn't personal. Still, I tried. I cooked for them. I paid for little things. School trips, sports equipment, new shoes when his feet grew faster than their budget. I was glad to help. Truly. It made me feel useful, relevant, needed. And perhaps that was my mistake. When people sense you're afraid of being needed less, they start treating your kindness as a duty, not a gift. I remember one afternoon last year. Cameron had misplaced his tablet and was tearing the living room apart, looking for it. I bent down to help him check under the couch, and he sighed dramatically. Gran, just move. You're slow. Not cruel, not loud, just dismissive. Casual. The kind of cruelty that slips through because it doesn't look sharp enough to cut. But it cut me anyway. He found the tablet 5 minutes later, in his backpack. He didn't apologize. No one asked him to. I wish I could say it was the only moment like that. It wasn't. There were jokes about my hearing, though I hear just fine. jokes about my driving, though I stopped driving at night purely out of caution. Jokes about my memory, though I still remember every birthday, every detail of our family's life, every promise I've ever kept. But they didn't see any of that. Or perhaps they did, and simply didn't care. And I, foolish, hopeful old woman, kept making excuses for them. He's stressed from school. She's just tired. They don't mean it. Excuses are warm little blankets, comfortable, but they don't stop the cold from coming in. Cameron's change became sharper when he turned 15. His voice deepened, his shoulders grew broader, but something in him shrank. Respect, maybe. Kindness. Those qualities that used to shine in him dimmed to almost nothing. He began filming everything: his meals, his friends, his pranks. He lived half his life through a screen, looking for laughs, for approval, for little digital hearts from strangers. I never imagined he'd turn the camera on me. But looking back, truly looking back, I can see how it happened. How a boy who once kissed my cheek without hesitation learned instead to laugh when I dropped something. How the same child who used to share secrets with me grew into a teenager who saw me as entertainment. Disconnection doesn't happen in a single betrayal. It happens in 100 tiny ones. And I had ignored 99 of them. The 100th, the video, only felt sudden because I had been refusing to see what was already in front of me. My family was no longer my refuge. I had become their joke, and jokes, as Cameron had already learned, play well online. There comes a point in a woman's life, somewhere between raising children and being quietly forgotten by them, when she realizes she has become useful in a very specific, very limited way. Not loved, not cherished, simply convenient. I reached that stage long before I admitted it to myself. It started with small favors. Mom, could you watch Cam for an hour? Then 2, then entire weekends. At first I didn't mind. I liked his company, but soon it wasn't about time together. It was about filling the gaps in their schedules, covering the parts of life they didn't want to deal with. I became the driver, taking Cameron to practice, to lessons, to meet friends who barely acknowledged me except with a distracted nod. I became the emergency cook, dropping off meals when they were too exhausted to prepare dinner. I became the backup wallet, paying for things they forgot to budget for. Every time they said, "Thank you, Mom," it sounded more like, "Good, that makes our lives easier." And every time I said, "Of course," it meant, "Please don't forget me completely." There's a quiet humiliation in realizing you've traded your dignity for proximity. I don't think they ever intended to use me. People rarely recognize their own selfishness. It creeps in like ivy, wrapping itself around your life until you no longer notice how tightly it holds. But the turning point, the real one, came when I tried to gently reclaim a piece of myself. It was last autumn. My arthritis had flared badly, and I told Michael I couldn't drive Cameron to his weekend tournament. I said it softly, apologetically, as if asking permission to be in pain. His sigh was long, weary. "Mom, it's just driving. Can't you push through for one day?" I laughed then, a small, surprised sound, as if pushing through hasn't been the foundation of my entire life. Cameron chimed in. "It's fine. I'll just call Uncle Rob. He's not as slow." Slow? Such an innocent word, but it stung. I felt myself shrinking, the way old women often do. Not physically, but into silence, into invisibility. After that, whenever I said no, even gently, their disappointment was unmistakable. So little by little I stopped saying it. I let them stack responsibilities on me like chairs in an old church basement. And I carried them, telling myself it was love. But love without boundaries becomes servitude. One evening, when Cameron was 13, he came over with a group of friends. They were loud, restless, knocking things over, as boys do. I served them snacks, refilled drinks, cleaned up behind them. One of his friends called me the maid. They all laughed, Cameron too. He didn't correct him. He didn't even look embarrassed. That was the first moment I felt something close to shame, not for what I had done, but for what I had allowed. The second moment came months later. Cameron asked me to help with a school project, building a model lighthouse. We worked on it for hours, my fingers aching, my eyes straining. The next day, he told his teacher he had done it alone. I heard him brag about it to Nora, who praised him for his dedication. I said nothing. Silence is the slowest poison. By the time he turned 15, I was no longer a person to him. I was a resource, a background feature, the safe softness he could fall onto when the world was too sharp, the easy target he could mock when he needed to feel tall. And teenagers always need to feel tall. There were days when he'd come over, slump into a chair, and start tapping his foot impatiently while I looked for my glasses. "Gran, hurry," he'd say, as if I were deliberately moving through syrup. If I asked him to repeat something, he'd reply, "Never mind, you won't get it." He spoke to me the way people speak to malfunctioning devices, with frustration, not compassion. But the worst part wasn't him. It was the way Michael and Nora ignored it, or excused it, or pretended not to hear it. Parents have a remarkable ability to overlook the harm their children cause, especially when the victim is old, quiet, and accustomed to forgiveness. I sometimes wonder when exactly I stopped being their mother and became their support system. It might have been the day Michael asked me, casually, over coffee, if I had ever thought about selling my house to simplify things for the family. Or the day Nora suggested I move into senior apartments so I wouldn't strain myself keeping up the yard. I still cut that grass myself. Slowly, yes, but proudly. If they had looked closely, they might have seen the fracture forming, a tiny one, almost invisible, the kind that grows under pressure until the structure collapses. But people rarely see what isn't convenient to notice. And so I stayed the dependable grandmother, the steady presence, the quiet backbone of their comfortable routine, until I heard the laughter behind that hidden camera, until I saw what I had become through the eyes of strangers. A joke, a stereotype, a piece of content. That was when the fracture finally reached the surface. Not the moment the video went online, not the moment Cameron shrugged at my hurt, but the moment I realized I wasn't just being taken for granted, I was being taken apart. The real betrayal didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, the way exhaustion settles into old bones. Slowly at first, then all at once. I remember the exact moment, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so painfully ordinary. That's the thing about wounds. The deepest ones rarely come with warning. It was early spring, a pale morning with light that made every speck of dust visible. I was sitting at the dining table sorting old mail when Cameron walked in holding his phone sideways, the way teenagers do when they're filming something. I didn't think much of it. He filmed everything those days. His breakfast, his sneakers, his dog. I assumed I was simply part of the background. I should have known better. "Gran," he said, "where did you put the charger I left here?" "The white one." I looked up, trying to remember. I don't lose things as often as they claim, but I do misplace them like anyone else. I think I saw it near the sofa, or maybe the desk drawer. He cut me off with a sharp breath. Can you just look? Why do you always move my stuff? Always. A small word, but it lands heavy. I stood up, slow because my hip was stiff that morning, and searched where I thought it might be. It wasn't on the sofa. Not in the drawer either. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. The old embarrassment that comes when someone is watching you fail at something simple. Cameron, I'm not sure where it is, I said. Give me a moment. He groaned loudly. Unbelievable. It's like your brain just resets every day. I remember freezing. I wasn't angry then. I wish I had been, but hurt in that soft, familiar way. I turned to him slowly. There's no need to talk like that. But he was already talking to his phone, not to me. She's doing it again, he said into the camera, acting confused every time. I didn't understand at first. I thought he was playing around, pretending, being dramatic. Girls and boys that age think meanness is comedy if it gets reactions online. I forced a small smile and reached out to touch his arm. Cameron, stop recording me. I'm not. He stepped back as if my hand were something dirty. Gran, seriously, don't start. It's just for fun. Fun. That word again. So elastic in their mouths, stretched to excuse anything. I breathed slowly, trying to steady myself. Please delete it, I said quietly. I don't want people seeing me like this. He laughed. Not a boy's laugh. A hollow sound, practiced and cruel. Relax. No one cares. Besides, it's not like they'll believe you over me. And that was when I heard Nora's voice from the hallway. Cam, are you ready? We're leaving in 2 minutes. She entered the room with her purse on her shoulder, smiling tightly, the way she always did when she wasn't sure how much warmth to pretend. She glanced at me, then at Cameron's phone. What's going on here? Gran lost my charger again, he said immediately, and she's like, confused about everything. Nora sighed, not sympathetically, but with mild annoyance. Mom, maybe it's time to start writing things down. You know, just in case. In case of what? I asked. She didn't answer. People rarely say the hurtful part out loud. They just leave it hanging between you like a damp cloth. Cameron shoved the phone into his pocket, smirking. It's fine, Mom. I'll edit it later. That was the moment. Not the tone he used, not the accusation, not even the recording. It was the way Nora didn't object, didn't correct him, didn't say one word to defend me. Her silence was permission. When the door closed behind them, the house felt colder. I stood in the empty dining room, my hand resting on the back of a chair, feeling small and foolish. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt you. It makes you doubt the version of yourself you've trusted for decades. I wondered if I really had misplaced everything, if I really was becoming slow, forgetful, burdensome. But then I saw the charger sitting neatly on the windowsill, right where Cameron had left it the day before. He hadn't even looked. He didn't care about the truth. He only cared about the story he could tell. And it dawned on me, painfully, plainly, that this wasn't a joke or a phase or teenage carelessness. It was disrespect allowed to grow unchecked. It was cruelty practiced until it felt normal. And I, an old woman they believed no one would listen to, stood alone in a house that used to be mine, realizing I had just crossed the threshold into a new kind of loneliness. The kind that comes not from being forgotten, but from being dismissed. There comes a moment in every long-suffering woman's life when she tells herself, enough, I must speak. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with the quiet dignity she hopes her family still remembers. That was my hope. Foolish, perhaps, but real. After the charger incident, after the laughter, after the hidden recordings, I decided to talk to them. A simple, honest conversation. I thought that if they saw my hurt, they might soften. People soften, I believed, especially toward the one who raised them. I asked Michael and Nora to come by for dinner. Nothing special, I told them. Just a meal. I'd like to clear the air. My voice trembled on that last part, though I hoped they didn't notice. They arrived late, as usual. Cameron didn't come at all. He's studying, Nora said, though the faint buzz of notifications from her phone told me he was very much online. I served the meal. Roasted chicken, Michael's childhood favorite. They ate quickly, mechanically, as if rushing through the part they considered a formality. When their plates were halfway empty, I folded my hands and breathed in slowly. I want to talk about something, I said. Something that has been hurting me. Michael didn't even look up from his fork. Mom, if this is about last weekend, Cam didn't mean anything. It's not just last weekend, I replied gently. It's been happening for a long time. The comments, the tone, the recordings. I'm not comfortable with any of it. Nora set her fork down. Not kindly, but with that careful precision people use when preparing to sound reasonable while being anything but. Evelyn, she began. Teenagers joke. That's what they do. You're taking it to heart because, well, you're sensitive these days. Sensitive. A word used to dismiss, not understand. I'm not imagining things, I said. I know when someone laughs at me. Michael sighed, rubbing his forehead. Mom, you have to admit, you do get things mixed up sometimes. It startled me. Mixed up how? You forget appointments. You misplace things. You repeat stories. It happens with age. We're just trying to help you cope. Help. That was the second lie of the evening. The first was that they were listening. I misplaced one charger, I said softly. Once. And I found it. That doesn't mean... Michael interrupted, raising a hand like a teacher silencing a child. Mom, please. This isn't an attack, but you're blowing things out of proportion. You've been emotional lately. I sat very still. Because I'm being treated badly. Nora exchanged a look with him, a look that said, here she goes again. Evelyn, she said, sweetening her voice to a syrup I never trusted. Sometimes older people misinterpret things. It's not your fault. It's natural. But Cameron isn't hurting you. He recorded me without my permission, I said, my voice steady, though my chest ached. And he posted it. Oh, that? Nora waved a hand dismissively. It was a silly clip, that's all. Silly to you, I whispered. Not to me. Michael leaned back, exhaling sharply. Mom, you're making this bigger than it is. Honestly, I'm starting to worry about your memory. Maybe you should talk to someone. A professional. There it was. The easy way to silence an aging woman. Question her mind. I felt the floor shift under me, metaphorically at least. All these years of giving, of helping, of never asking for anything. And this was the moment when they showed me how little they thought of me. Michael, I said quietly, I know what I see and what I hear. He shrugged. Well, no one else does. Cam says you misremember things all the time. My son's words hurt, but Cameron's words filtered through them, that cruel, dismissive phrase echoing in my memory. No one will believe an old woman. No wonder he had said it with such confidence. His parents had paved the way. Dinner ended abruptly after that. Michael claimed he had an early morning. Nora pretended not to notice my shaking hands as she collected her purse. Neither offered a hug. The door closed behind them with a soft click. A small sound, but it rang in the house like a bell announcing an ending. I sat at the table, my untouched plate still warm, the chicken cooling piece by piece. It wasn't the conversation I had hoped for. It wasn't a conversation at all. It was a quiet confirmation. They weren't hearing me. They weren't seeing me. They were defending the story that made their lives easier, the one where the old woman is confused, emotional, unreliable. And for the first time in a long time, I understood something with complete clarity. If I wanted the truth to be seen, I would have to find someone other than my own family to see it. There is a particular kind of silence that settles in a house after disappointment. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy one, thick like dust in an abandoned room. After Michael and Nora left that night, the quiet wrapped around me so tightly, I felt I might suffocate if I didn't move. But I didn't move. I simply sat at the table, staring at their empty plates, the faint smudges where their fingers had touched the forks. It was strange. I had expected to feel anger after that conversation, the kind that makes your hands shake and your breath come in short bursts. But instead, I felt something else, something darker and colder. A kind of clarity. It's a dangerous thing, that clarity. It strips away illusions you relied on for warmth. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, knowing full well I was doing it to keep my hands busy, to stop them from trembling the way my heart was trembling inside my chest. As I washed the plates, their voices echoed in my head. Emotional, forgetful, mixed up. Words said with casual certainty. Words that could erase decades of competence and turn them into a story about decline. It struck me then. This wasn't new. This erosion had been happening for years. I remembered moments I'd brushed aside. Nora correcting me at the grocery store for something I hadn't said. Michael retelling a memory of my life the right way, while I sat there knowing he'd changed the details. Cameron laughing at a joke I didn't understand, and when I asked why it was funny, saying, "Never mind, it's too complicated." Small things. But small things accumulate until they form a wall. And that night, I saw the wall clearly for the first time. I dried my hands and went into the living room, lowering myself into the old armchair that still held the shape of my body from years of use. I stared at the quiet room, the soft lamp, the crocheted blanket, the family photos on the mantel. Pictures of a life I'd built with my hands, one careful day at a time. A life they now interpreted as fragile. I whispered aloud, "I'm not losing my mind." The room didn't argue with me. The room remembered. But their words had cracked something inside me anyway. A small hairline fracture running through all the trust I still kept tucked in my chest. I felt the shift. Subtle, but irrevocable. The moment when a woman stops blaming herself and starts questioning the people around her. I sat there for a long time, listening to the house breathe. My breathing joined it, slow and steady, until I felt my heart settle. Not in peace, no, not that, but in resolve. Because somewhere deep in me, deeper than the hurt, deeper than the exhaustion, something had begun to wake. A tight coil of instinct. A soft voice that said, "They will not stop unless you make them stop." I wasn't ready yet. No. I was still too shaken, too tired, too accustomed to being the one who absorbed everything without complaint. But I felt the first stirring of resistance. a quiet no forming in the back of my mind, still unspoken, but alive. The next morning, I moved around the house differently. I didn't rush. I didn't apologize to chair legs or door frames when I bumped into them, as if even furniture were more worthy of gentleness than I was. I brewed my tea, took my vitamins, sat by the window, and watched the sun crawl across the fence. And for the first time in years, I didn't answer when Cameron texted, "Gran, can you drive me later?" I simply let the phone buzz until it quieted. It wasn't rebellion. Not yet. It was something simpler. Rest. Distance. A moment to gather the pieces of myself they'd chipped away. Because I finally understood, painfully but clearly, that the thing breaking inside me wasn't age. It was trust. And trust, once cracked, doesn't heal with apologies or explanations. It heals with action, with truth, with the courage to say, "I see what you're doing, and I won't let you anymore." I wasn't ready to speak those words out loud, but my silence that day was the first step toward them. The day I saw the video, really saw it, not just glimpsed it in a notification, something in me shifted so sharply it felt as though the world tilted with it. I had known, of course. Cameron hadn't exactly hidden his smirk when he filmed me searching for that charger, but I didn't imagine he would post it. Not my own grandson. Not the boy whose small hand once clung to mine at crosswalks. It was early evening. The light outside had turned that soft gray blue that always reminded me of my late husband's eyes. I was preparing tea when my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a woman I barely remembered, the daughter of an old neighbor. She'd written only 4 words. "Is this really you?" And then a link. My finger hovered over it for a moment. A part of me already knew. But knowing and seeing are different kinds of pain. When the video opened, I heard my own voice before I saw my face. Confused, tired, muttering to myself as I checked under cushions and drawers. The clip had been edited to highlight every stammer, every pause, every sigh. And the music, some obnoxious tune meant to make everything look ridiculous. A title flashed across the top in bold white letters. "When your granny glitches again." Glitches. As if I were a broken machine. I watched myself on that screen, hunched slightly, concentrating, unaware I was being mocked. There is something uniquely cruel about seeing a version of yourself stripped of dignity you didn't even know you needed to defend. The comments were already piling in. "She's losing it. Poor kid, imagine living with that. Old people creep me out. Someone put her in a home." A few defended me. Strangers, ironically, kinder than my own family. But their voices drowned beneath the laughter. I sat there, staring at the screen, the steam rising from my forgotten tea. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a long time. Because grief doesn't always arrive with tears. Sometimes it arrives as stillness. When I finally managed to breathe, I checked who had posted the clip. Cameron's username. His account. His choice. He had shared it publicly, not privately. Not as a small joke sent to a friend. Publicly. And worse, I saw that he had posted 2 shorter clips before it. Ones I hadn't known about. One of me struggling to open a jar. Another of me mishearing Nora, because she was speaking while walking away and called my name over her shoulder. Nothing dramatic, but pieced together, they painted a picture of a woman unraveling. Exactly the story he wanted strangers to believe. A notification appeared at the top of the screen. A new comment. from Cameron himself. "Gran can't keep up." I felt something cold settle in my lungs, my own grandson laughing at me among strangers, offering me up like free entertainment. And then the worst moment, the moment I had been avoiding without realizing it, came when I heard Nora's voice on the video. I hadn't noticed it that morning. "Cam, stop bothering her," she said, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "Just post it and let's go." Just post it. Just post your grandmother's humiliation. Just make her the joke of the day. And then I understood everything. They weren't worried about my memory. They weren't concerned for my health. They were crafting a narrative, one where I was the fragile, unreliable one where their cruelty looked like caretaking. I didn't feel anger yet. That would come later, simmering and sharp. What I felt was older than anger, heavier than grief. It was the recognition that the people I loved had crossed a line so quietly, so naturally, that they probably didn't even see the line at all. I placed the phone face down on the table and stared at my own reflection in the darkened window. My hair silvered, my shoulders slightly rounded, but my eyes were steady. Steadier than they had been in years, and for the first time since this began, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. Awake enough to realize that my silence had been taken as permission. Awake enough to understand that the story they were telling about me was becoming louder than my own voice. If I didn't protect myself now, no one else would. And so, in that quiet room, with the video still playing softly beneath my fingertips, I whispered to myself, "This will not be the end of my story." In the days that followed, something quiet but irreversible settled inside me. It wasn't anger. That burns too hot, too fast. This was colder, sharper, a stillness that allowed me to see everything around me with a clarity that felt almost like stepping into new light. For most of my life, I had taken people's words at face value, especially my family's. If Michael said I was mixing things up, I believed he must be right. If Nora insisted I was too sensitive, I tried to harden myself. If Cameron laughed at my confusion, I assumed it must somehow be my fault that I didn't fit into their jokes. But after the video, after watching strangers laugh at a distortion of me, I felt something shift. I stopped assuming they were right. I stopped assuming I was wrong. Instead, I began to watch. It happened naturally, without fanfare. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't argue. I didn't even mention the video. I simply allowed myself to observe what I had been too trusting to see before. For the first time, I noticed how often Nora spoke about me in past tense, as if I were already fading. "Mom used to be so organized," she'd say on the phone, right in front of me. "She used to remember everything." Used to. A burial disguised as a compliment. I noticed how Michael exaggerated every small mistake I made. If I forgot where I put my reading glasses, even though everyone misplaces theirs, he'd sigh heavily, shaking his head in a way that wasn't frustration, but performance. And Cameron? Well, he had begun collecting moments. I didn't catch him recording again, not openly. But I saw the way his phone angled whenever I entered the room. The way his eyes lit with expectation, waiting for me to slip, to mumble, to hesitate, waiting to catch another glitch. A predator doesn't need teeth. Sometimes all he needs is a camera. I started writing things down, not because my memory was failing, but because I wanted proof. The exact times I left the house, the dates of conversations, the places I set objects so there would be no question about where they belonged. I kept a small notebook in my apron pocket and filled it with quiet truth. At first it felt strange, this new vigilance. But the more I observed, the more certain I became. They had been shaping a narrative around me for months, maybe years. A narrative where the old woman was confused, emotional, unreliable. It was easier for them to see me that way, safer. It made their own choices, neglect, impatience, convenience, look like good intentions. Because if the old woman really was slipping, then they weren't cruel. They were caretakers. I suppose lies grow best where no one challenges them. One afternoon, I overheard Nora speaking on the phone in the hallway. "Well, she forgets things all the time," she said. "It's only a matter of time before we need to step in and help manage her affairs." Manage my affairs. 3 small words that felt like a cold hand closing around my throat. I didn't make a sound. I simply stepped back into the kitchen, sat down, and wrote it in my notebook. Each entry felt like placing a stone on the ground, forming a path I would eventually need. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. What I wanted, what I needed, was truth. My truth, not theirs. And as the notebook filled, as their behavior revealed itself piece by piece, something inside me stopped trembling. I wasn't confused. I wasn't declining. I wasn't imagining anything. I was finally, unmistakably awake. But awakening is only the first step. The next would require courage I hadn't used in years. The courage to reach out, to ask for help from someone who didn't see me as a burden or a story already written. And I knew exactly who that person might be. Help rarely comes from the people you expect. Family, for all their closeness, often becomes blind to your suffering. But strangers, or almost strangers, sometimes see you more clearly simply because they have no reason not to. For me, that person was my neighbor, Julian Price. Julian lives 2 houses down, a retired engineer with kind eyes and hands that still move with quiet precision, as though he's forever measuring something in the air. We weren't close, not really. We exchanged pleasantries about the weather, shared tomatoes from our gardens in the summer, and once he helped carry a heavy box to my attic. A polite, distant sort of friendship. But then one afternoon, as I was wheeling the trash bin down the driveway, he called out to me. "Evelyn, everything all right?" It was such a simple question, and yet it nearly undid me. I must have looked different without realizing it. Smaller, maybe. More tired. People who've been hurt often forget how visible their wounds can be. I forced a smile. "I'm all right, Julian. Just a bit of a long week." He studied me quietly, not prying, just noticing. Most people don't notice older women unless we're in the way. "Would you like help with that?" he asked. I wasn't used to anyone offering. "No, thank you. I've got it." He didn't push. He simply stood there, waiting. Then, gently, "If you ever need anything, you know where I am." I nodded and continued on, but his voice lingered in my mind. It had been so long since someone spoke to me without impatience or dismissal. Later that day, while scrolling through my phone in quiet dread, I accidentally tapped the video Cameron had posted. It opened without warning, my own confused voice filling the room. I flinched and dropped the phone onto the couch. It vibrated with new notifications. More comments, more laughter. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the back of my hand. I wiped it quickly, annoyed with myself. I don't like crying. It feels like surrender. But the humiliation, the betrayal, the helplessness, it sat on my chest like a stone. I needed help. Not emotional comfort, something practical. Someone who understood technology in a way I didn't. Someone who could explain how these videos spread, whether they could be deleted, whether anything I did could stop them. And I found myself standing on Julian's porch without remembering how I got there. He answered on the second knock. Concern flickered across his face the moment he saw me. "Evelyn, come inside." I didn't argue. The warmth of his living room felt like stepping into a place where the world moved at human speed again, not the frantic pace of teenagers and their endless screens. I sat down, hands folded, trying to steady my breath. "I need to ask you something," I said quietly. "But it's embarrassing." Julian shook his head, soft but firm. "If you're here, it's important. Tell me." So I did. Not everything. Not the whole story. I couldn't bear to speak it aloud yet. But enough. I told him about the video, about the comments, about Cameron posting it. My voice cracked only once, and Julian pretended not to notice. He listened without interrupting, his brow tightening with every detail. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. "Do you have your phone?" he asked. I handed it to him. His hands were steady, confident. The hands of someone who had fixed complicated things for most of his life. He opened the video, skimmed the comments, and let out a quiet breath that was almost a growl. "This isn't harmless, Evelyn. This is targeted humiliation." Hearing someone else name it, plainly, without excuses, made my eyes sting. "Can it be removed?" I asked. "Not easily," he said. "But it can be documented, saved, and used." "Used?" My voice was barely a whisper. Julian nodded. "If anyone ever tries to paint you as confused or unstable, this proves the opposite. It shows exactly what's being done to you." I stared at him, stunned. My own family had tried to convince me I was imagining things. But Julian, who owed me nothing, saw the truth immediately. He spent the next hour teaching me how to save the videos, how to take screenshots of comments, how to back up everything in a secure folder. His patience was quiet but unwavering. Not once did he speak to me as if I were incapable. When I finally stood to leave, he touched my arm gently. "You're not alone, Evelyn. Not anymore." Something inside me, something small and trembling, exhaled for the first time in months. I walked home slowly, the sky turning gold above me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a thought form clearly, steadily. They think I'm weak, but I'm not nearly as alone as they believe. It's astonishing, really, how much truth sits in the corners we never thought to look into. Once Julian taught me how to save and search through Cameron's posts, it felt as though someone had handed me a lantern in a room I had been stumbling through for months. Suddenly, every shadow had shape. Every doubt had weight. I didn't go searching out of anger. Not yet. I went searching because instinct told me there was more. More than the single video that had humiliated me so deeply. People don't start cruelty at full speed. They test it, inch by inch, waiting to see who will object. So I opened Cameron's account, and I began scrolling. The first thing I noticed was frequency. He uploaded often. Far more often than I had realized. His profile was a mosaic of half-jokes, pranks, commentary. Nothing unusual for a boy his age. Until I began to see how often I appeared. Not directly at first. Not in a way an outsider would catch. But I knew. There was a clip titled, "When Old People Try to Talk Tech," and though my face wasn't shown, the voice in the background, slow, careful, trying to understand, was unmistakably mine. Another clip. trying to explain memes to someone born last century. The camera pointed at the floor, but I recognized the pattern on my slippers. A third, when she forgets again. A blurry shot of my living room. My living room. Each clip, short, edited, framed to build a story. The same story Michael and Nora had casually repeated at the dinner table. She's losing it. She's confused. She's emotional. The narrative wasn't accidental. It had been curated, piece by piece, post by post, like a slow drip of poison. I kept scrolling until my thumb ached. With every video I found, little snippets stolen without my knowledge, my breath grew shallower, my chest heavier. But it wasn't despair this time. It was confirmation. For months, maybe longer, Cameron had been using me for attention, for laughs, for the cheap currency of online approval, and his friends loved it. They rewarded every clip with comments that turned my dignity into entertainment. When I finally set the phone aside, the room felt unbearably still. I stared at the wall, my thoughts moving with surprising clarity. There is a unique sorrow in realizing someone you love has been studying your weaknesses, not to protect you, but to expose them. And yet, in that sorrow, something steadier emerged. A foundation I thought I had lost. I knew the truth now. Not the story they told. Not the story they tried to make others believe. I knew my truth, and truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. That night, I opened Julian's folder, the one he helped me set up, and copied every clip into it. Every comment, every screenshot, every timestamp. Not for revenge, not even for defense. But because a woman who has been dismissed for too long eventually understands the value of documentation. Paper trails don't gaslight. Screenshots don't shift narratives. Dates and files and saved evidence do not waver the way human loyalty does. For the first time in many months, I slept well. Not peacefully. No, peace was still distant, but solidly, like a woman who finally stands on firm ground. In the morning, I brewed my tea and watched the steam curl upward, thinking of what I had uncovered. The truth wasn't pleasant, but knowing it made me feel stronger than any comfort they had offered in months. Cameron thought he could control the story. So did Michael. So did Nora. But they had forgotten something important. A quiet woman is not a blind one, and an old woman is not a powerless one. I closed my notebook gently. It was time to decide what to do with everything I'd learned. Courage doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes as a slow, steady warmth in the chest, a warmth you barely recognize at first because you've lived too long in the cold. That's how it felt the morning I decided to speak to someone outside my family. Not a neighbor, not a friend. Someone who understood the weight of evidence, of rights, of dignity. A lawyer, or more accurately, a legal counselor at the community senior center. I'd passed by the place for years, a modest brick building with peeling paint and a small sign that always seemed slightly crooked. I used to think of it as a place for other people, people who needed assistance or guidance, not me. I had always handled my own affairs, paid my bills, managed my home, balanced my life quietly and efficiently. But time and humiliation change the way you see yourself. And knowledge, the kind I had now, demanded guidance. The waiting room was small, neatly kept, with chairs that creaked and a faint smell of lemon cleaner. A young woman at the front desk smiled warmly, not pityingly, which surprised me. "How can we help you today, ma'am?" I'd like to speak to someone about a family matter," I said. My voice was steady, steadier than I expected. She handed me a form but didn't rush me. I appreciated that. People often rush the elderly, as though our time is worth less than theirs. After a few minutes, a door opened and a man in his early 50s stepped out. "Mrs. Marsh?" he asked gently. "Yes." My knees felt a bit weak as I stood, but not from age, from the weight of what I was about to say aloud. He led me into a small office. Papers were neatly stacked, a bookshelf filled with binders, and a single plant leaning toward the window as though reaching for something better. He offered me water. I declined. "What brings you in today?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because once I said it, it would become real in a way it hadn't yet been. I folded my hands. "My grandson posted videos of me online," I began quietly. "Humiliating ones. Recorded without my permission." He didn't interrupt. That alone eased my shoulders. "And my family," I continued, "has been suggesting I'm confused, that my memory is failing. I believe they're trying to create a narrative that I'm unreliable." I expected skepticism, a raised brow, a polite but dismissive smile. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. "Do you have evidence?" "Yes." And the confidence in that one word surprised even me. I took out the notebook, the screenshots, the videos saved on my phone. He looked through each piece slowly, methodically, with the seriousness of someone handling something fragile but important. When he finished, he sat back. "Mrs. Marsh," he said, "this isn't just disrespect. This is coercive behavior, manipulation, potentially financial exploitation if it continues, and the videos, recorded without your consent, are admissible evidence if needed." Evidence, a word that felt like a warm coat being placed on my shoulders. "Am I allowed to protect myself from my own family?" I asked, the tremor in my voice betraying decades of loyalty. He nodded firmly. "You not only can, you should. You have rights, autonomy. And from what you've shown me, you're fully capable of managing your affairs." No one had spoken to me like that in years. Fully capable, autonomous, in control. He gave me a list of steps. Simple, actionable, nothing dramatic. Document everything, save every message, keep the originals untouched. And if I ever felt pressured, threatened, or misrepresented, I should come back immediately. "You're not powerless," he said as I stood to leave. "They only made you feel that way." Outside, the air felt different, brighter, though the sky was cloudy. I walked home slowly, steady on my feet, each step landing with a purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't revenge that filled me, not anger, not bitterness, but something far more dangerous to those who underestimate old women: a quiet belief in myself. And belief, once awakened, becomes its own kind of justice. There is a certain stillness that settles in a home when a woman stops doubting herself. It isn't loud. It isn't triumphant. It feels more like a long, slow breath after years of holding it in. That was the feeling that carried me through the days after my meeting at the senior center. A quiet certainty that I was no longer drifting through the cruelty done to me, but preparing, deliberately, for whatever came next. The house felt different. Not bigger, not brighter, just mine again. I moved through it with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. I began with small things. I labeled folders on my computer, video evidence, screenshots, notes. I made copies, just as the counselor advised. One on a flash drive, one in the cloud, one printed, tucked inside a manila envelope in my desk drawer. Old women learn early that paperwork is armor. Next, I cleaned the house, not because it needed cleaning, but because the act of restoring order has always steadied my mind. I swept the kitchen, polished the old teapot, folded blankets with slow, deliberate care. I wasn't distracting myself. I was preparing the ground beneath my feet. Because when the truth finally comes out, a woman needs solid footing. Every so often, my phone buzzed with messages from Cameron. "Gran, can you pick me up after school? Gran, why aren't you answering? Mom says you're acting weird." I let each one sit unanswered. My silence wasn't punishment. It was protection. I wasn't ready to speak to him, not while the bruises from his betrayal were still tender. Michael called once. I declined it. Nora texted a polite, chilly question. "Are you feeling better?" As if my pain had been a temporary cold. I didn't respond to her either. It felt strange at first, withholding myself. But the quiet that followed each ignored message brought a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. They had always expected access to me, automatic, unearned. And now, for the first time, that access was closed. I made tea in the evenings and sat by the window, notebook open on my lap. I wrote down everything I remembered, every comment, every sigh, every dismissive gesture, every moment they had tried to twist into weakness. Not because I needed the reminder, but because memory written down becomes fact. Julian checked in occasionally. Never overbearing, never prying. He brought over a container of soup one afternoon, saying only, "Made too much." I thanked him, though we both knew the truth. He didn't look at me with pity, only with quiet respect. It's remarkable how healing it is to be treated as competent. In the stillness of those days, I realized something. I was no longer afraid of their narrative. I understood it now. The convenience of it, the carelessness, the way it simplified their view of me. But I also knew the truth lived in my hands now, in my folders, in my notebook, in my spine. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house filled with that soft amber glow only old rooms know how to catch, I closed my notebook and rested my hands on its cover. I felt ready. Not for confrontation. Not yet. But for the moment when I would have to step into a room with them and speak without shaking. The woman they thought they could dismiss was gone. The woman who remained was steady, alert, and quietly resolute. And in that golden light, I understood something else. The next move would not belong to them. It would belong to me. The day of the family gathering arrived with the kind of cold, bright sunlight that makes everything look sharper than it should. I hadn't been invited, of course. Nora wrote in the family group chat that it would be a small dinner, just the three of us. She didn't know I had already seen the reservation confirmation pop up on Cameron's screen the week before. 7 people, not 3. My name, not among them. I didn't feel hurt anymore. The pain had already passed through me and left something stronger behind. A woman cannot bleed forever. At some point, the wound becomes a scar, and scars are armor. I dressed quietly, not in anything dramatic, just a clean blouse, pressed slacks, and the small pearl earrings I wore when I needed to remind myself of my own worth. I placed my notebook in my purse, along with the flash drive and printed copies. Not as a threat, as truth with weight. Julian offered to drive me when I mentioned the dinner. "Just to make sure you're steady getting there," he said. I accepted. There is no shame in accepting help when it's offered with respect. The restaurant was warm and loud, full of families talking over each other. Laughter, clinking glasses, soft music. In any other time of my life, I might have enjoyed it. But tonight, I was focused, calm, every step deliberate. I saw them before they saw me, seated at a round table near the window. Michael laughing loudly, Nora touching her hair, Cameron half distracted by his phone. They looked comfortable, unburdened, not a trace of guilt on their faces. It's strange how people can forget the existence of someone they claim to care about when it makes their evening easier. As I approached, I watched their expressions shift one by one. Nora's smile froze first. Michael blinked, confused. Cameron's face tightened, not with remorse, but with irritation. I greeted them softly. "Good evening." Michael stood halfway. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to join you," I said, "since this is a family dinner." Nora's voice turned sharp. "We didn't invite—" I raised a hand slightly, not to silence her, to steady myself. "I know," I said, "but I'm here anyway." There was a brief, brittle silence. Cameron leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms like a boy caught doing something he doesn't consider wrong. "Gran," he sighed, "why are you making this weird?" Weird. As if my presence at my son's family dinner were an intrusion. "I'm not here to argue," I said gently. "I'm here to tell the truth, and to let you hear it." Michael frowned, shifting uncomfortably. "Mom, if this is about the video—" "It's about all of it," I replied. "The lies, the comments, the recordings, the things you've said about me behind my back, the story you've all been building." Cameron's eyes flicked to his phone. Habit more than guilt. I saw the moment he realized this wasn't going to be as simple as brushing me aside. So I set my purse on the table, opened it, and placed my notebook beside the bread basket. Nora stiffened. "What is that supposed to be?" "Documentation," I said, with a calmness I didn't have months ago. "Of what's been happening, dates, screenshots, videos, notes." Michael's face went pale. "Mom, why would you—" "Because you've been telling people I'm confused," I said, meeting his eyes. "That I'm losing my memory, that I'm unstable. And Cameron has been recording me to support that narrative." Cameron scoffed, but it wasn't confident. "You're blowing this up." "No," I said softly. "I'm seeing it clearly." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply spoke the truth they had tried to bury under convenience. You wanted a version of me that justified treating me like a burden, so you created one. But I haven't lost my mind. I haven't imagined anything, and not one of you asked how I felt. Around us, voices and plates clattered, oblivious to the small earthquake happening at our table. The world rarely notices when an old woman reclaims herself. Michael swallowed hard. "Mom, we didn't mean—" "Intentions don't erase consequences," I said gently. Then I closed the notebook. Not dramatically, just firmly, with the finality of someone who knows her own worth again. "I'm not here to fight," I added. "I'm here to make something clear. I will not be treated like this anymore." Nora opened her mouth, then closed it. Cameron looked away. The silence that settled wasn't hostile. It was stunned. And in that quiet, I felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, but alignment. A sense that at long last, I had stepped into the correct version of myself again. A woman who speaks. A woman who sees. A woman who will not be erased. After I closed the notebook, something subtle shifted at that table. Not in me, but in them. There is a kind of silence people fall into when they realize the story they've been telling no longer holds, when the person they thought they could speak over refuses to sit quietly in the corner. Michael was the first to look away. Guilt shows itself in the eyes before the mouth ever admits it. "Mom," he said, softer than I'd heard in years. We didn't understand how serious this was. I watched him carefully, not with suspicion, with accuracy. "You didn't try to understand," I replied. "That's the difference." He lowered his gaze, the way he used to as a child when he knew he'd crossed a line. Nora straightened in her seat, her fingers tightening around her glass. "Evelyn, we were concerned, truly, but you're acting like we plotted something malicious." I tilted my head. "You built a version of me that made your lives easier. Whether you meant harm or not doesn't change what you allowed." Her face flushed. Embarrassment, not remorse, was always her strongest emotion. "And Cameron?" He stared at the tablecloth, jaw tight. The boy who once laughed freely now looked trapped by his own carelessness. But teenagers rarely acknowledge guilt until they have no other choice. Finally, he muttered, "It was just videos. Everyone makes videos." "Everyone doesn't humiliate their grandmother," I said quietly. He flinched, a small movement, barely noticeable. But I saw it. A crack forming, thin as a hairline fracture. I didn't want to break him. I only wanted him to see me. "Cameron," I continued, "I loved you long before you cared about likes or comments. I deserve better than becoming material for your entertainment." He swallowed hard, still not meeting my eyes. That was enough for now. Change never arrives instantly in boys who believe themselves invincible. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, what? What are you planning to do?" A reasonable question, and one that told me exactly what he feared. Not losing me, not hurting me. Consequences. "I've already spoken to a legal counselor," I said calmly. "Everything that's been done, every recording, every post, every false claim about my memory, is documented." Michael's shoulders stiffened. Nora's lips parted in a small, startled breath. Cameron finally looked up. "I don't intend to drag my family into court," I added, "but I won't tolerate manipulation or disrespect. Not anymore." It wasn't a threat, just a boundary, the first one I'd placed in years. Julian, who had quietly waited near the entrance, as we agreed, gave me a small nod from across the room. Not overbearing, just supportive. Present. And that steadiness bolstered me more than any raised voice could have. "I'm capable," I told them simply. "I'm of sound mind, and I won't allow any of you to suggest otherwise again." Nora blinked, stunned. "We weren't trying to take anything from you." "Intentions," I repeated gently. "Don't erase patterns." They knew I was right. I saw it ripple through their expressions. The slow, dawning recognition that they were no longer speaking to the pliable, apologetic version of me they'd grown accustomed to. I stood slowly, gathering my purse. My hands didn't shake. "This dinner was for you," I said. "But this moment is for me." Michael rose halfway, instinctive, almost pleading. "Mom, please don't leave angry." "I'm not angry," I said, and it was true. "I'm finished." And there is a difference, a profound one, between those two states. As I walked toward the door, I felt the eyes of families around me, couples, children, grandparents. But not one of them knew the quiet war I had just fought. Old women fight their battles inside their bones. The world rarely notices. Julian held the door for me. The cold evening air wrapped around my shoulders like a clean breath. You did well, he murmured. I did what I should have done long ago, I answered. We walked to his car, not quickly, not triumphantly, just steadily, like people who understand that dignity is not won in loud declarations, but in small, unwavering steps. For the first time in years, I felt tall, not in body, but in spirit. And the night around me felt wide open, not threatening, not lonely, but full of the kind of quiet promise that belongs only to women who have finally reclaimed themselves. The next morning felt different, though nothing in the house had moved an inch. The same photographs sat on the mantel, the same kettle whistled on the stove, the same sunlight pooled on the carpet in that familiar, gentle way. And yet, the air felt clearer, as if the walls themselves finally exhaled. I moved slowly through the rooms, not out of fatigue, but out of a sense of ownership, a quiet reclaiming of space I had shrunk inside for too many years. My footsteps sounded steady on the hardwood floor. My hands didn't tremble when I opened the curtains. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't bracing myself for the next apology I'd be expected to give. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, letting the steam soften the morning chill. My phone lay face down beside me. No messages from Cameron. None from Michael or Nora. Silence from people who had once expected immediate responses from me. Now they hesitated, unsure how to approach the woman who had finally drawn a boundary. It wasn't punishment. It was space. And space, I was learning, is a gift you give yourself when others cannot be trusted to respect your edges. Around mid-morning, Julian stopped by. He didn't knock loudly, just a soft tap, the kind that announces presence without demanding attention. When I opened the door, he smiled the way gentle men do, small, genuine, without expectation. "Just checking in," he said, "and bringing you more of that soup you liked." I laughed softly. "Julian, if you keep feeding me, I won't have room for my own cooking." He shrugged, placing the container on the counter. "Then I'll consider it a win." We sat for a while, talking about ordinary things. His garden, my roses, the new road work on the other side of town. Not once did he mention the dinner. Not once did he ask whether they apologized or argued. He simply treated me the way I had been craving to be treated, as a full, capable person. Someone with thoughts worth hearing. Someone still whole. After he left, I returned to the table and opened my notebook. The pages were full now. Neat handwriting documenting months of small humiliations, screenshots, timestamps, evidence of truth. I glanced through them, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Proof can be painful, yes, but it can also be freeing. I removed one sheet, a printed screenshot of the very first humiliating video, and slid it into the back of the notebook. A reminder of the line that had been crossed. A reminder of why I would never allow myself to be silenced again. Then I closed the notebook for the last time. The story wasn't ending, but this chapter was. When Michael finally reached out, a tentative message asking if we could talk, I did not answer immediately. I let the request sit for a full hour before replying. "Yes," I wrote, "but not today, and not on your terms." It wasn't revenge, it was balance. As I set the phone down, I felt a warmth flood my chest. Not excitement, not relief. Something quieter, steadier. Self-respect. Something I had forgotten I could feel in such abundance. I stood by the window and watched the light move across my garden, catching on the last stubborn flowers that refused to wilt before their time. "I know how you feel," I whispered to them. Old women and late-season flowers have more in common than people think. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills the lungs and the spine together, and allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Because they were wrong about me. They all were. I was never fading, never fragile, never losing myself. I had simply gone unheard. And now, finally, my voice carried. If you've been reading my story, if you recognize even a piece of yourself in it, then listen to me now. Don't let anyone decide who you are. Don't let anyone speak over your truth. And if you've ever been made to feel small, remember, you are not alone. Leave a comment, share your voice, so the world knows we're still here, standing tall. Always, always taller than they expect.